The red button is on. We're recording. Uno, dos, tres. Uno, dos, uno, dos, tres. Yeah, I like what I sound like.
We started off bilingual
Yeah,
up in here.
yeah. Sometimes we do that. We had
Yeah.
Ichi-Ni-san a few weeks ago. Yeah, sometimes it happens, man. Um, I find that I don't know. Maybe this is me stereotyping a stereotype, but I find that Americans really enjoy like throwing the 5 words they know of other languages into casual conversation all the time. You know?
Well, American English is like filled with like a hodgepodge of other languages. Like,
Yeah.
how do you describe a tortilla without saying tortilla?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not flatbread, you
Or
know?
lasagna for that matter.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. It's not just the
All about
foods.
food.
Yeah, it's not just the foods, but
It's, he
there,
has a certain je ne sais quoi.
well,
What?
yeah. You ever have a rendezvous? Yeah, you know what I'm
Right,
saying.
right,
Um, I'm your outreach liaison.
right.
So anyway, I used to be an English major. I used to want to be an English teacher when I was a lot dumber. Sorry, English teachers. I love you to pieces. It's just, yeah, man, y'all really have a tough job cut out for you these days. That being
Oh,
said,
yeah.
you just heard me say y'all. One of the things that I developed as a result of having such proper English drilled into me over 14 years or whatever is a real love for like regional dialect and like just all things colloquial. Like
Sure.
I just
Absolutely.
love like double negatives, man. I love me a good ain't got none, you know. I love me a good don't never do that.
Right, right,
And that kind of stuff, y'alls and all the things that your parents told you weren't in Webster that are now all of a sudden actually in Webster
right.
anyway.
Yeah, they keep on adding stuff, right?
So what I like about that is and maybe this is the martial artist in me too, or just the artist maybe,
Mm,
it just shows like such in the figurative sense of the word, such color among the population.
right,
And I really appreciate that. I'm a people person, even though I'm kind of an introvert too. I'm also like a people person, so I
right.
really enjoy. So that's why, yeah, we start bilingual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pepper a little je ne sais quoi up in your Spanglish. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh
Bad
man.
bilingualism. I like it.
Oh, so here we are, Saber Martial Arts Podcast, and Alan, believe it or not, this may be episode 40. I'm pretty
Ooh,
sure this is episode 40, which is wild. That is
yeah,
wild.
good.
Hopefully on to 400, and by the time we have 400, hopefully we have more than 1,000 subscribers. That being said, thank you for listening, for subscribing. Please, if you're that kind of person, throw us a like button, throw us a comment. If you're on YouTube listening, subscribe, throw us the comment. If you're on a podcast app listening, again, thank you. And, throw us a review, throw us a subscription. Stop saying throw us now.
Unless we're doing judo.
Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate you. Alan appreciates you. And yeah, the more you listen, comment, subscribe, all the things, the
Share.
more we reach more people like you, and then the more we can all get together next year in Saber Valhalla. So that's
Ooh,
our
Saber
little
Valhalla.
shameless plug, sabermartialarts.life, for anything related to that. Hit us up on email, sabermaoutreach@gmail.com, or mastervenable@phoenixsaber.com, and I promise we can help you. Or maybe you can help us, and we love that too. So tonight's episode, this is one of those things that all the nerd boys are gonna have to change their skivvies after I say it. We're doing Teras Kasi. We're not just doing Teras Kasi though. We're doing Ichani arts. Oh, we're not just doing that though, you KOTOR fanboy dweebs. We're doing Chirrut Imwe, and we're doing Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we're doing the Acolyte, and all of the unarmed and non-lightsaber martial arts that we have seen in and around Star Wars since really the beginning. So, maybe that's where we start, Alan. Like, what is the beginning, as far as you remember, of unarmed martial arts in Star Wars? Like, was there anything in the original trilogy? Maybe not unarmed. Okay, so there was like vibro axes and stuff, but they didn't really like fight with them, did they?
I have one thing to tell you.
Okay, what's
Let the
that?
Wookiee win.
That's true. Unarmed. I get it.
Hmm.
Well, that's true. I guess Chewbacca would. Did he like punch anybody out in the original trilogy? Like, I can't think of anything. Darth Vader threw the Emperor down a chasm,
Hmm.
right?
With a
So
body slam.
yeah, yeah. So no, really, like the original trilogy is pretty either lightsabers, blasters, or naughty words, right? Like not
Right.
but
Yeah, I mean, basically, there was nobody that was gonna judo chop or anything in A New Hope. Um, there was no in Empire Strikes Back, like Vader blocked a blaster bolt with his hand.
hmm
You know, that's really the only unarmed or yeah
I guess
stuff
that
there.
counts. We'll
Yeah,
count that
there was
under
a
like a.
there was a forced kick on the sand skiff
Oh
on
yeah,
Tatooine.
Luke does throw a pretty novice front kick, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll
Um,
we'll start with that. We'll give Luke credit, and we'll give Darth
mhm,
Vader honorable mention for his
mhm.
defensive palm.
Right,
uh,
right.
so
There was, I mean, if you think about it, there are tons of weapons in the Star Wars
that's what
universe.
I was gonna just
So,
briefly touch on. The original trilogy, there's definitely a host of non lightsaber weapons displayed, right? All
yeah.
of Jabba's palace, there's all kinds of weird, like Leia's weird blaster staff thing that she
Hmm.
uses when she's Bausch. Um,
Hmm.
there's like the Gamorrean guards have like these cleaving,
Okay, so you pronounce it Bausch. I've
yeah,
heard people call her Boosh.
yeah. I don't like that. Again, English major. I'm not saying I'm 100% correct on this, and anybody who really teaches English can email and correct me. Please, I'd like to talk to you. But I think just taxonomically, it should be Bausch. I don't know if that's not the right word.
Yeah.
Taxonom. I don't think that's
Well,
the right
it's
word.
Bou,
Yeah.
right?
Like when you go the
Boush,
opposite of in, where do you go?
right? You
You
don't
don't
go
go
oot
oot. You
unless
go
you're
out.
Canadian.
Right. If you're Canadian, I'll give it to you. So maybe the people who say boosh, maybe they heard it from a Canadian. Um, as with many things in Star Wars, you never actually heard them said on screen. They're like given a
Right.
name for like
Oh,
toys and stuff. Sometimes I feel
except
like
for
they take.
Terrace Kasi. It was name dropped in Solo.
Okay, so thank you for the segue.
Yeah.
And Terraskasi is, I believe, a Danish term. I just looked it up earlier. And Finnish, I think, Finnish, and it means steel hand. And
Ooh.
um, if you have actually looked into it a little bit, apparently this is the first mention of what you might call non-lightsaber or unarmed martial arts or non-Jedi martial arts in Star Wars.
Mhm.
It was mentioned in Shadows of the Empire, invented for Shadows of the Empire by the author Steve Perry. And I believe that it was
The
invented.
lead singer of Journey?
I'm like, not a Journey guy. So no. Many people are not Shadows of the Empire people either. That's a whole different podcast episode. But Steve Perry was training in Pencak Silat at the time, which is an Indonesian martial art. I don't want to say
Lat.
similar to Arnis, but elements of
Mm.
very various Southeast Asian martial arts.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
of course, its own and hundreds of styles of it, by the way. But Pencak Salat is its own kind of thing, and it deals with unarmed, it deals with weaponry, grappling, throwing, stand up, striking, joint manipulation, and such.
Yeah, mainly to knock somebody off a bridge.
Yeah, it's very yes, that's true. Yes, because of of the environment that they lived in, the way they
Mm-hmm.
trained and things. So yeah, definitely, if you're listening to this, go in and look at some of the things that we're mentioning over the course of tonight, because they are a lot of them based on real world martial arts or elements of such. So anyway, Salat, Steve Perry was apparently training in Salat at the time when he was writing the book. So he used it to describe like Shizor and Guri, his little droid biddy. And I say that with all respect, female listeners. And the training that they had, I guess. And I think Shizor, I can't remember if it's explicitly stated in the book or not, but I believe Shizor trained in Teräs Käsi to be able to nullify Darth Vader's force powers and lightsaber prowess should he have to fight him. Because they were both kind of the Emperor's like
Right and left hand.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And I think this predated Thrawn. I could be wrong about that, but I think this predated Thrawn. So Shizor was not necessarily an Imperial. He was the head of Black Sun, which has stuck around in canon, which brings us to Teräs Käsi later in Solo with Kira, right? So,
And he actually, Jizor was in the last episode of Clone Wars.
Correct. Yeah. So and a bunch of Falleen, which is the alien So anyway, this Teräs Käsi, yeah, that's as far as I know the first mention of it, and then about maybe a year or two later, when the Masters of Teräs Käsi game came out, that's when it was stated again, and that's when it was given the term, or that's when it was not given the term. That's when it was sort of that Arden Lin character who's on the cover of that game. She's supposed to be like hundreds of years old or whatever, and just an absolute master of all, martiality. But she's the master of Teräs Käsi, and she's, got to kill Luke Skywalker or whatever. So it was developed for non-force wielding, non-lightsaber carrying persons to combat force-wielding, lightsaber-carrying persons.
Right.
What does that kind of remind you of in the real world, Alan? Like, aside from Salat, because that's apparently what it was based on. Like, what other kinds of martial arts would you immediately jump to if you were trying to, like, formulate what this might look like?
Well, because when you said steel hands, it made me think of Iron Palm.
I knew you were going to say that.
But it's Damak is its own bag of wax.
Yeah.
When we're looking at it, but a quick aside, or while staying on topic, most of the stuff is most of these Teräs Käsi moves that have been in canon are all named after animals.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So my mind goes to like any of the animal martial arts. So like the Gundark slap, the Nexu grin, Rancor rising, like all these things. I'm like, I've heard all these before.
I don't know where the hell these things came from. I know they're listed, like the citations are there and what have you, but like this is one of those times where I kind of look at the actual canon material and I go, I can put you aside for a little bit. This is one of those times where the Legends stuff tends to be a little juicier. Like, what martial art do you... Well, okay, I should stop this question right off the bat because you do wushu and everything is called like grasshopper eats snake from inside out, right? Like... rapid eagle takes flight. So that kind of naming convention is not necessarily foreign to me, but also it kind of is. In Kempo, for example, you might have some technique called like devastating fans or, bite of the serpent. Sure, you might have that. But I just like Rancor reach or whatever, like Nexu grin. Like, what the hell is, what do you grin at the person? What the hell does that even mean?
So there's a movement called Forraderi, which is actually Swedish for treachery. That's something I just learned.
And I feel like they don't necessarily describe all of these moves either. Some of them might have,
Right.
but I've looked at this page you're looking at, and I tend to click to the legend side in this case because
Yeah.
it just, I don't know. I feel like I fill in the gaps better than the canon material does. Um,
Sure. Well, a lot of this stuff is pretty much describing a lot of e- a lot of stuff that's pretty easy to translate into the stuff that I know, mainly because like you said, a lot of the poetry of kung fu and wushu is done in a way that emulates an animal because the history is that most people didn't know how to read, so
oh
they
yeah,
they had poetry and they had animals to describe. So have you ever seen, a crane? Yes, then this is called flying crane.
right. One of
Make
my
yourself look
favorite
like a crane flying.
one of my favorite kata from Japanese karate is, or all karate, is called gankaku, which is, and I'm probably saying that poorly, but it translates, I think, to crane sitting on a rock.
Hmm.
Right. So like, but when you actually watch the form, you're like, oh yeah, that kind of looks like a crane sitting on a rock or something. And then you're like,
Yeah,
oh, that's what it means.
right.
um, so yeah, I should maybe walk that back a little.
Yeah.
But I just think it's kind of hokey that the ones they've chosen. And again, I don't know
Mm,
who chose that. Maybe it's from like some young adult book or something, right? Like,
sure.
so I'm sure it's
Well,
from
a
like,
lot of these look like they're from Darth Maul Shadowhunter, which is a book
oh,
that's
yeah, I read
pretty
that book
pretty
by
cool.
Michael Reeves. Yeah, I read
Yeah.
that book a couple times.
Hmm.
Really? Is that what the citation says? Interesting.
Yeah, most of them.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Maybe I'll have to go back and visit this page a little bit, and I encourage our listeners to do the same, and to also make fun of me if they feel like it for anything I say
Sure.
that kind of sounds like
There's a
I'm walking
couple
it
of these
back.
that actually do have descriptions of the attack.
Yeah.
Like the spitting roll is a sideways flip, bringing one's feet down on the opponent 3 times before bashing with both fists at the same time in a vertical fashion.
Well, this might have been something from the actual Terrace Kasi game too. So actually, now that I say that, Arden Lin combo list. Let's see. Arden Lin's combos and moves. Metal
Nice.
Hammer, Super Metal Hammer, High Power Punch, Super High Power.
Yeah.
No. Wind Up Swing, Quick Sonic Blast. No, come on. Super Rising Axe Kick, Super Rising Axe Kick.
The
I don't
Pike
see anything that
Sisters.
sounds ridiculously poetic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Interesting.
most of this is from Darth Maul, it looks like. Ooh, actually, Jedi Master Anun Bundara, Jedi Knight Jokla Danva, and Jedi Master Plo Koon.
Anun
As
Bandara, I believe, was Old Republic, if I remember correctly.
32 BBY.
No, then
Darshan.
um, he was a Twi'lek Jedi, correct?
Yes, he was from Ryloth.
Yeah, I
So,
can't remember exactly which one he was
so
now, but that sounds familiar.
he
Was he in the
died in the
comic
Clone
books?
War. Yes.
Yes, the Dark Horse series. Yes, yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. So that kind of brings us to the fact that a lot of Force users actually were trained in Terrace Kazi, which is very
Hmm.
interesting. Right? Like know your enemies or keep your
Yeah.
friends close, your enemies closer kind of thing.
Yeah.
If they develop this style of martial art to combat what you bring to the table that's unique to your order, and then all of a sudden your order, or the Sith or whatever, the people that it was designed against start using it. That's layers, right? That ogre's got onions of layers.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I sort of use Terrace Kasi as like a catch-all term for
Yeah.
non-lightsaber martial arts, even though there are other ones listed.
Hmm.
And So that came up again in Solo. Kira, uses Terra's Kasi. We don't actually get to see it. She's behind a door, and next thing you
She has a
know,
flying armbar.
oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do get to see that. Oh, that reminds me. We also have that. We'll get to it chronologically speaking. Cara Dune. Don't even forget about Cara Dune too, and her little MMA fight that she has, which was one of the coolest scenes in all of The Mandalorian. But so we get kind of past this. We're talking Earth timeline here.
Sure.
We get through this mid '90s, right? The dark times, as it were, and we start to get into the 2000s and the late '90s and the 2000s, and we see the prequels, obviously, and we see what can be done with a lightsaber. But I believe at that time, that's when this notion of Terrace Kasi, the Ichani arts with the Knights of the Old Republic games coming out, and just some of the lore from the comic books in the Dark Horse series and such, they were really starting to dabble this martial arts culture into the Star Wars storytelling.
Right.
From the lightsabers through the unarmed stuff. Like I believe Jango Fett and some of his, Mandalorian Kui Valdar would train the ARC troopers in Terrace Kasi and things like that, because the Mandalorians had not just Terrace Kasi, but their own unarmed martial arts to fight against Jedi with. And their armor and arms were things that they developed specifically to combat Force users in many ways. I feel like a lot, now that I'm saying this, I feel like a lot of the martial arts that weren't lightsaber based were developed because Jedi used lightsabers. It's like, we got to fight these Jedi. Why did everybody want to fight? Well, I guess everybody wanted to fight samurai too, and knights too, right? Like, or not necessarily fight, but like they had a power over you that you didn't want them to have.
Well, think about it this way: if anything, that any of the High Republic storytelling has told us, and the prequel trilogy has told us, the Jedi kind of flex their power.
Yes, as we saw in the Acolyte a little bit.
Yeah, they flex their station as power, basically. So there's a lot of that in the Star Wars timeline. Is like it's who watches the Watchers, right? Who's the, it's they kind of grew unchecked and didn't have anybody checking them, so of course that's what happened. The fall of the Republic is basically the fall of any empire, right? When one faction does not have checks and balances, it always goes bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course everybody does that. I mean, that's also why the Empire fell so hard and fast, right? The Republic lasted for a couple thousand years, and the Empire was like 30 years. So
I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, I mean, especially if you don't count the Imperial Remnant in that mix, right? Like there's Well, no, even counting the Imperial Remnant, because really the events of the original trilogy take place over the course of what, like 3 years, and there's 19 years before that. So yeah, I mean 20 plus years. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way.
Yep.
Interesting. So yeah, but it kind of works the same way here on Earth too, right? Like ninjutsu, for example, in many ways, it and its various forms, like, I don't know, taijutsu or something like that. They, in many ways, were developed as recipes to combat, samurai martial arts such as, kenjutsu or jujutsu or whatever. Their, methods and tactics, the weapons they used, these were designed to fight armored opponents with swords and bows and arrows and spears and things, but as an unarmed or largely unarmed individual, right? So similar things. That's just one example. You could talk about the way that the colonists here in the United States, back when it was a British colonies, the way that they took the formal training from the European, military style. They took many of the elements of the native tribes around them. They took elements from other European countries, such as, Spain in particular comes to mind. Just the way that they use these things. And then, of course, just being farmers, a lot of them, or just being, ship workers or things like that. They just took their everyday life and sort of made it into a martial mindset, a martial style. The way that the colonists fought was so much different than the way that their, the British soldiers fought against them. And the way that the British soldiers and the colonists fought in the French and Indian War and the French army, everybody had a different style, and it was designed to fight a specific other different style. The arms race today is just the same way. The way that, our militaries and our martial arts styles, even, the gear we use, the weapons that they use, the body armor, the uniform colors and patterns and things, everything. The high-tech gis that jiu-jitsu people use today, Brazilian jiu-jitsu people use, and all the way up to sport karate. I mean, I just got an advertisement today from Century Martial Arts about their Punok competition karate uniforms. Like, it's kind of crazy. Everything is developed to sort of address maybe varied but sometimes specific needs. Obviously, it sounds really obvious as I'm saying it, but in Star Wars, it's there. Like, there's this kind of rich culture of it that, when Disney bought it, I hate to say anything bad. I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying the sort of legends material. If you're a martial arts nerd, that tends to kind of be lost. But it seems like they're tending to bring it a little bit back in. We have Dave Filoni, who worked on Avatar, so he has a lot of the martial arts in his brain, right?
Right.
The Ahsoka series, very, very sort of martially minded, even though it wasn't really unarmed in that way. But
Ezra did not forgo, or actually did forgo the use of the lightsaber.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that was cool, man.
Yeah.
How about how badass Ezra turned out to be, right?
Right.
That was so cool. And the Mandalorians overall. So I guess we can come up to this now, because after the early 2000s, then we got a whole bunch of martial arts in Star Wars. Boom, 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 rapid fire. The video games had great animations for, like, I remember the Revenge of the Sith game, just incredible animations for lightsabers and stuff. But we started to also get, just the comic book content was out of this world from a martial arts perspective on a lot of it. The Clone Wars, the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, when we got Mace Windu on Dantooine fighting super battle droids without his lightsaber.
Yep.
I mean, what is that? Terra's badass costume? I don't even know what to call that. I can't say it because I'll have to put a droid sound in, and I don't feel like it.
It was called Shanju.
Are you being serious? Are you selling me a line right now?
No, Shanju is what it's called. It's the unarmed martial arts of the Jedi Order.
Where did you find this information?
Also on Wikipedia.
Yes. Tell me. Spell this.
So Shanju was an ancient art of unarmed force combat. So you would utilize the force in combat. So you saw that with in the Acolyte. You saw Master Indara use a
Mm-hmm.
lot of
First episode,
Shanju
yep.
in that, and you saw a little bit of Master Soul using it as well.
But now, where do you
Wow,
see this? I'm looking for this here. Attack of the
unarmed
Clone.
martial arts
Did you actually just type
list.
that in?
Yeah, list of hand-to-hand combat styles.
Ugh. Oh my gosh. I hate me. Ugh. Eh.
You don't know the power of Google.
Well, here we go.
Um,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, your Google foo is strong tonight. So they have pancration in here, like right off the bat. Pancration is basically the origin of MMA. Is the original
hmm
world martial art. We talked about this with Sensei on the Sojido episode a little bit.
hmm
And modern day UFC, MMA, Bellator, whatever your flavor is largely based on pancration. I believe they still have pancration in
They do
in the
in
world.
Greece.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say I believe they still have combat or
yeah.
competition pancration,
They have like schools on the beach.
and they teach it as part of their military training, I believe, as well. So,
Yep.
but it's basically just MMA. It's just to have but more of a self defense base, more of a
Right.
causing real physical harm base.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I'm looking down here now. I'm looking for now. This is a Wikipedia article. No. I don't want a Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
Where did I get? Oh my gosh, you guys are getting a great episode tonight. So anyway, Mace Windu and his Shanju, however you spell that, because I can't find it.
SHON-JU.
Okay, thank you. SHONJ. Wikipedia. You know what? Whatever.
Yeah.
Wikipedia. StarWars.wikia.com. My gosh. Sean Jew. Guys, follow along with me. So Mace Windu uses his Shanju on Dantooine. That was right around 2003, right? That came out. That series. So
Yeah, 2002, 2003.
we're still in the early 2000s. That just shows you like across how many different types of media. And I think it was because Duel of the Fates was so incredibly cool. They met Ray Park. They realized what could be done with martial arts in Star Wars. And they were
Right.
like, oh my gosh, we got to do it all over the place now.
Yeah, why haven't we actually done a wuxia flick in Star Wars? Oh, wait.
So by the time we get Mace Windu's animated ass doing this, and guys, please, if you have not seen this, go on to Disney Plus if you got it, or YouTube, and look up the 2003 animated Clone Wars, cartoon Clone Wars, and look up Mace Windu just laying waste to battle droids for 3 minutes.
Yeah. The Andy Tarkovsky version,
Just
2D.
yes, just incredible. If you're a Samurai Jack fan, you'll love it. And if you don't know what
Dexter's
Samurai Jack is, oh
Laboratory.
my gosh, I
Yeah.
know. The guy did the most awesome stuff. So anyway, and the art was done by Paul Rudish. So we should give a shout out to that because Paul Rudish can capture martial arts stances and positions and feeling better than almost any cartoonist I've ever seen. I don't know who did most of the art for Avatar. The name's off the tip of my tongue right now, but that's another one. Like they just understood the way martial arts should look,
Right.
and that's incredibly difficult to make real people do. I feel like, but
Yep.
with animation, it can also be incredibly difficult, especially with 2D. But they really just got it. And Paul Rudish used to talk about how like as a kid he would just try and draw like all his favorite superheroes doing all his favorite like martial arts stuff, and you can see it in Samurai Jack. Like Samurai Jack is an impeccably talented swordsman,
Right.
and he doesn't even have 3 dimensions. So, yeah, 2003. We really by that point we were at the peak of our martial arts in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Um, Revenge of the Sith, the Battle of the Heroes. That's
Yeah.
lightsaber, but you're seeing the Wookiees on screen. You see they have, all kinds of different weapons. You have more force pikes and spears in the prequel trilogy, more axes
Right.
and just all kinds of stuff like that.
Right.
The Geonosians had all kinds of pokey proddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had like the lore surrounding all these characters was that like Jango Fett, for instance, was some amazing underground fightist, but we're not going to see that in a George Lucas movie when we only have 2 hours to get the story done.
Right.
So
I mean, there's a bunch of there's a list of hand-to-hand combat styles in the Star Wars universe that you can go through and just see like, holy crapola, there's a
there's
ton
a
of
bunch.
these
Well, let's
videos.
get into the Ichani now because that's right around this time too.
Mm-hmm.
The Ichani arts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm no like KOTOR like a lot of the KOTOR people are really into KOTOR. Like my brother, for instance, has played
Mm-hmm.
the first two Knights of the Old Republic games. I'm saying first two because there's the Old Republic, but he's played those first games. I mean, 100 times each. He just plays them when he's like bored on a weekend. He'll just like
Yeah.
play through it real quick,
Yeah.
and it's not real quick. So I'm gonna look this up right now. Why do I not see a search bar here? Where's this freaking search bar? There it is.
Shani
It's not a search
is
bar.
the
It's a magnifying glass.
form of martial arts taught to the stormtroopers and imperial officers as part of their standardized training.
See, now I didn't see that, but I saw that the Red Guards, the Imperial Guards, obviously are trained in all sorts of martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we got out of the Crimson Dawn comic series and stuff like that. I think that was what it was called. Crimson Empire,
Yeah.
rather.
There was also Zavat is the other one.
Not to be confused with Savat, or are we talking
Right.
about the same thing?
Right. So Zavat is another martial art that's taught to only the officers.
Right. Which
So
we can assume is maybe what's the word? A proxy for Savat, which is a French martial art.
right, that was actually just fencing without a sword.
Yeah, they use sticks, don't they? Like long sticks.
No. So Savat it was literally when they correct me if I'm wrong if I'm misremembering this, but once dueling was outlawed, you couldn't carry a sword around.
Right, right.
But they still had all the techniques and moves as if they had a sword. So all their punches were like lunges. All their kicks were and footwork was like that too.
Yeah. Wasn't John Claude trained in that as well?
Maybe
High
I thought
kicks,
he did
front hands, front legs.
yeah, I think he just did karate, but I could be wrong.
Savat,
Um,
also known as French boxing, is a French
mhm.
kickboxing combat sport that uses the hands and feet as weapons, combining elements of English boxing with kicking techniques. I mean, yeah, it's kickboxing, but
Yeah.
um,
And in order to train, they would actually train on ships so that
oh,
the surface they're standing on would constantly move.
Savat is a French word for old shoe or boot. Savat
Yep.
fighters wear specially designed boots. A male practitioner, blah blah blah. Okay. Um,
But yeah, that was
interesting.
so we so that particular Star Wars martial art has been attributed to, it looks like 2015 is when it was mentioned.
Which one?
Zavat
Okay. Yeah, so that must have been
with
in
his
a book or something, you said?
yep, it's in the Aftermath series.
Oh, that makes sense. By Chuck Wendig. That
Yeah.
makes sense. I was actually going to guess that, not
Hmm.
because I remembered, but
Right.
when you said 2015, that was the big series at the time.
Right.
Um, I believe Asajj Ventress also. I'm thinking back to the Tartakovsky Clone Wars again. She did do some stuff without her lightsabers in that, but um, in
Right.
both
Well, remember, she used to be a Jedi.
true, but in between all that with the Night Sisters and stuff too, because we know the Night Sisters are trained with swords and other weaponry. They have their own anti-Jedi martial arts.
Right.
So I think she talks about that a little bit with Quinlan Voss in the Dark Disciple book. Again, I could be remembering this incorrectly, and I could be mashing in the old Quinlan Voss comic book material because both he and Asajj Ventress had their origins in comic books.
Right.
But it was very like what I sort of glean from some of these storytelling is that the lightsabers weren't really the most important part of the martial arts for a lot of Force users.
Right.
It was the discipline of training that got it. Like Obi-Wan, for instance, like if he didn't have to use his lightsaber, I'm sure he wouldn't. And we've seen him in Filoni's Clone Wars not use a lightsaber and really do well, even with his hands shackled, right? And just does very well. But it's a matter of the discipline of training, of the physicality and the mentality. And the lightsaber is just the purest expression of it for those people.
Right.
But like for a Mandalorian, it would be a blaster, right? Or a Beskar sword. Which, God, man, there's so much good stuff. That brings me to the Republic Commando series. Because Karen Travis mentioned many different martial arts, like influences that the clones had, especially the Commandos and the Arcs, because they were trained directly by the Mandalorian lieutenants of Jango Fett. And it just like... and again, in Filoni's Clone Wars, you have the Rookies series, basically. All those episodes where they're training in the Camino facilities, and it's just. But I can't. I'm actually like, my mind is kind of blown right now. When I had the idea to talk about this, I didn't really realize that it was going to be me just kind of sitting here going, "Holy crap! There's so many different martial arts in Star Wars."
Yep. Yep. It kind of has to be. It has wars in the name.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't even know where we're going with this at this point. We're kind of like on this weird like magical mystery tour of like both Earth and galaxy far away martial arts right now.
Right.
It's kind of trippy and cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you are into Star Wars and you're into martial arts, it doesn't end on the lightsaber, right? There's so many weapons in the Star Wars universe that are both ranged and in melee. And then, of course, there's got to be something that fights those things.
Yeah.
That would only make sense, right?
Well, you just made me think of something too. I love what you just said. It's not just the lightsaber. Well, like think about like here on Earth, like we love a sword, don't we? And when we're training in saber martial arts, or just, you know, if we have a saber competition coming up or something, and maybe we don't actually train, but we like to fight, right? It's all about sword techniques. But you and I both know and both employ many other different weapons and unarmed styles in our lightsaber techniques.
Right.
Like, very soon I'll be doing a class on tomahawk techniques on our holocron on YouTube. And right away, after we do some tomahawk stuff, we're going to do some stuff, the same stuff, with a lightsaber in your hand. And you're going to understand, like, right away, it's not just about the sword. Just because they look the same, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that influences. You know, spears were probably the most common weapon on the battlefield.
Mm.
But a lot of spear technique is lost.
Right.
Unless you're doing what? Kung Fu, maybe some African martial arts still have spear tech. I'm trying to think.
There's pike techniques too from the
Now
the
in
European
HEMA,
martial arts.
now in HEMA they're bringing back these pole arms as well. Karate has or not karate, but Kabuto has its various pole arms and things. But like you really don't see a lot of like spear specialists these days. Like when you go to a traditional martial arts tournament, the number of spears you see used to be a bunch.
Right.
Maybe one or two now. Even the
Well,
traditional like the Dao broadswords, you're seeing fewer and fewer of them.
right. Well, I'm like I did explain before that when you were a private in the Chinese army back in the day, they'd give you a sword and a shield, to hopefully survive,
Yeah.
the Mongol hordes. But the sergeant would get a spear, right? And then you'd get a broadsword and a shield, and then your sergeant would be able to point over your shield, and go that way,
Oh, interesting.
and then beyond that is the usually the officers would have straight swords or jian in
Yes.
order to do battle and not hack somebody in half, but actually go in between the points of the armor so that they don't actually kill the person but can interrogate them. So usually only an officer could kill another officer, sort of deal.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's all like, wushu, martial arts historian stuff
Well,
I
that's
picked
kind of
up
what
over the years.
I mean, it's adjacent to the topic, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're already
Oh
dancing
yeah.
around all these different histories, and
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Spartans and their short spears or javelins and they had the uh, form of the gladius, which was actually only had no actual edge to it, but it was big and made of metal, so it could like bash you.
yeah, I don't know if you've
And
seen this other one they had too. You might be even talking about the same sword, but they had one, and this is, of course, the Spartans were the Iron Age, I believe, right? Maybe
Mhm.
Bronze Age, Iron Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. I don't know. Somebody knows. But they had I believe it was an iron blade
Mhm.
with a bronze hilt
Mhm.
and heavy as hell, but it
Mhm.
was, I think, like 14 inches long or something like that.
Yep.
And the blade was, I don't want to say serrated, but jagged.
Yeah.
No, maybe we're talking about the same one.
I was talking about
Okay.
another thing, the Roman legions
Okay.
with the door shields.
So the
They only
guy
had
who
yeah.
I talked about last week who fixed my tomahawk, he just came to class the other day, the other coach,
Mhm.
and he made a cavalry style gladius
Oh,
in his
nice.
forge, and he's putting an edge on this thing. He's going to do a real sort of traditional style hilt on it, but like he showed me some of the inspo pics for him, and
Hmm.
like just the variation among the gladius
Yeah.
is ridiculous
Yeah.
over the centuries, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what the hell does this have to do with what you were originally talking about, Fode? Well, like look at all the weapons in Star Wars. Like the Night Sisters, again, let's go back to them because they're one of
Hmm.
we saw a lot of them, first of all. We still seeing them with like the Jedi games and with Marin
Yeah.
and Asajj Ventress making appearances back in Bad Batch and Clone War. All the just the Night Sister stuff it's been around for 30 years now because it started with the
Yep.
courtship of Princess Leia many years ago. But
Did it though?
I
Didn't
think
it start with
I think
the
so.
Ewok adventure?
Night. I don't know if that chick was a Night Sister or not.
It was. It was a.
Was she a Night
That was.
Sister?
She was supposed to be a Night Sister. That
Oh, I
was
didn't know
that
that.
was the origin of the Witches of
There
Dathomir.
you go. Well, that's like 40 years then, right? God, those movies are terrible. But I'm gonna stick with Courtship of Princess Leia.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, they very um explicit is the wrong word. Very overtly are creating styles and weaponry to combat Jedi Knights.
Oh yeah.
Light bows, for example, right? Like
Hmm.
just the fact that it is not a projectile that can be cut,
Right.
not a projectile that can be physically grabbed with the force and thrown to the side.
Right.
That is an interesting, like, technological decision, really.
Hmm. Right,
And
and also they rode on Rancor,
they
which
wrote
were
on Rancor. I was going to say
yeah,
that.
which were force resistant, not force immune, but force resistant.
Well, in some of the Dathomirian Jedi, like Tenel Ka
Hmm.
or Tenenio Ka Tichun Joe or some nonsense like that, um, she was half Night Sister, basically.
Hmm.
And the other half was Hapen, I believe, which was like sort of like the way I read it, sort of like your real proud European knight class, you know,
Sure.
very, very martial, but very pomp and circumstance and proud of what they developed, right? So she had both of those things. She had a rancor tooth in her lightsaber hilt. You know, she
Which you
fought
can
with
do
one
in
arm. She had
which you can do in the new Jedi game, the
correct,
Jedi Survivor game.
and also in that game, the bad guy fights with one arm, and
Hmm.
his other arm is like there in the like he fights with it through the force, which is freaking
Right.
wild.
Hmm.
Go check out our YouTube channel. I'm playing that right now on Gamer
Yeah.
Martial Arts. Go check it out. So I guess we'll just keep talking about the variation. Like it's all over the place. So fast forward a little bit, we get Cara Dune with really the most modern display of martial arts in Star Wars. Straight
Yeah.
up MMA. They're connected
Right.
at the hip with pod racer coupling, basically, and she puts the guy in an arm bar, right?
Right.
They start out kickboxing. It ends up in a grappling
Right.
match. She freaking locks his joints up and
Hmm.
taps him out.
Yeah.
That was cool. That was for
Yeah.
me. That was one of those moments where Star Wars takes stuff you know, makes it look like something new, but also something familiar.
Right. And just as a side note, Gina Carano
Yeah.
was in the movie Haywire with Ewan McGregor.
I am not a Gina Carano hater. If you are, that's your prerogative. But
Oh,
Gina,
she and Obi-Wan fight in that movie. So
oh, that's
good
cool.
watch. It's a cool thing. It was back in 2011.
Well, I'd love to
But
have her on the
yeah,
podcast. So if anybody
yeah.
knows how to get a hold of Gina Carano, tell
Oh
her
yeah.
to chat with your main man Fode and Sifu Allen. We want to talk martial arts and Star Wars with her. Yeah, she's a legit. I mean, she was probably like Ronda Rousey gets a lot of the credit for bringing attention to women's MMA, but
Right.
Gina Carano was really one of the first to ever do it.
Yeah. I want to say she was first. She did it and then Ronda did it. I could.
I believe she was. Yeah, I believe she predated Ronda. She's older than Ronda.
Yeah.
But she also was just really good. And I think she had a professional Muay Thai career before her MMA career. Um,
She was in Elite Extreme Combat
yeah, Elite
and
XC
in
was
Strike Force.
yeah, and Strike Force is among many MMA fans. Strike Force is still one of the best examples of the best MMA you could have seen.
Hmm.
And Elite was another really good one. But she was kicking so many other girls' asses at a time when nobody even knew that women fought. And that's who they decided to put in Star Wars as their example of MMA, and they did such a great job putting that in there. Um, her character over the course of the like just looks and acts like a fighter. Um,
Hmm.
Also hella respectful and like what's the word, disciplined. She's also a military vet, but just the fact
Hmm.
that she's like you can just see like that martial art, that George St. Pierre sort of attitude.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's cool. For
Yeah.
me, that was a very special moment. As was, I know it's going to be good for you, Chirrut Imwe. That
Hmm.
was another very special moment for me because I think that was the first time we ever saw unarmed martial arts in a Star Wars movie, and I don't know if we've seen it
Well,
since.
to be fair, he didn't really do unarmed stuff. He did a lot of
I,
stuff with
I
his
keep
stick.
saying unarmed. I really mean unlightsabered.
Yeah.
That's what I mean when I say but
Yeah.
I should stop because I'm yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Non lightsaber martial arts.
Yeah.
Uh,
So he did Zamashiwo, which
okay.
is which was a martial art that was native to Jeddah.
Yeah.
Was mainly more like the description is more like Tai Chi, or and other internal martial arts where they have the ability to alter their heart rate and oxygen intake.
Yeah.
They are able to have preternatural endurance and strength because of how they breathe, and etc. But yeah,
Oh.
it's
So it was Zamashiwo.
Zamashiwo, Zama
Yeah, I see it
dash
here. Prior to the
Shiwo. Yeah.
prior to the first battle of Geonosis, the Jedi Padawan Charlin Plaka received training in Zamashiwo during a mission to
Hmm.
Jeddah. Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was a badass scene, man.
Yeah, you are not wrong.
The
The inward eye of the outward hand was amazing.
Well, we had the Force Awakens right before that,
Hmm.
and
Right?
the lightsaber dueling in Force Awakens was sort of like the lightsaber dueling in the original trilogy, with good reason. It
Hmm.
was just kind of not something that anybody had had to do in a long time. And
Right.
then Ray fought with her staff a little bit. That
Hmm.
scene was actually not too bad. Um,
Yep. And most of it was cut out.
I know, I know. Oh God, it makes me cry, man. Poor Constable Zuvio. Where'd he end up? Uh,
Hmm.
so that was actually not bad though from a fight choreography standpoint.
Hmm. Well, it was
Simple.
also East versus West, and a staff practitioner holding a sword for almost the first time, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Actually, that is a good point. Um,
And also, good old, uh, good old Ben Swallow was not actually trying to kill
right.
her. So just
And we had that like Tonfa and Shield situation
right.
with
Mm.
TR8R.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean for the kind of basic,
Yeah.
but then we get Rogue One year later, and it's kind of like a mini Duel of the Fates dose, right?
Hmm.
Like a little dose of Duel of the Fates to the arm, real quick.
Right.
Just a quick zip to keep you rolling. Um,
Right.
yeah, we do not as math condone the use of substances.
Hmm.
But it was kind of like, oh my gosh, somebody's really good at martial arts again.
Yeah. And to show you that there is more than the lightsaber out there,
Yeah,
right? So when you first uh, really take a look at Rogue One, there's only one lightsaber in it,
that's
right?
right. It's Darth
And
Vader.
it's Darth Vader at the very end, uh, as almost fan service. Uh, to hey, you went with us this far. Check this
Oh,
out.
it's blatant fan
You know,
service because they told us
yeah,
up until the moment it premiered that there was no lightsabers in this Star Wars.
right.
Oh, you
I
guys
believe they said
won't know what to
there's
do about it.
there's no lightsaber duel in this.
Yeah.
No lightsaber duel. Nobody dueled him.
So I I was and again, just from a fight choreography and cinematography standpoint,
Hmm.
that particular scene
Yes,
was
that
just
was
leaps and bounds above anything we'd seen since the Phantom Menace, really.
yeah, and it once again made the stormtrooper look bad. Uh,
And once again made Donnie Yen look like he is, which
yeah,
is
that's
incredible.
yeah. His stunt team just went, okay, well, this time we're going to be wearing armor. Awesome, that's
Yep.
more than we usually get.
Yep. Yep. And I liked that's something that we don't really talk about too much in martial arts, but we do talk about in saber fighting just as a sport
Hmm.
very often
Hmm.
is armor selection.
Yep.
You know me, I'm a minimalist when it comes to armor. I hate that stuff, but some of it's necessary, and I feel
Yep.
like between like the Jedi and Clone Wars and sort of like when you see bounty hunters armor selections, some of it's just fantasy and like just because it looks cool. But like you
Yeah.
see Chirrut and he's got like little
Ropes.
bits of armor here and there, right? Like
Hmm.
Baze is on the other hand decked out to the gills and he
Yeah.
doesn't really worry about hand-to-hand combat from the looks of it
Right.
because his
He's got his
blaster does the
his
talking.
chain blaster. Yeah.
But that's a martial art too, right? That's a
Hmm.
non-lightsaber martial art too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for people who like to shoot here on Earth, like, man, they really get into it in a big way, just as
Yeah.
much as any black belt or more.
Right.
I have a friend who he's a sheriff's deputy now, but he was in the army as well, and he also teaches firearms classes, and just his like I think I know a decent amount about martial arts, but like
Hmm.
just what he knows about shooting,
Oh yeah.
absolutely it's on a different level of it's on the level of any martial artist, but on a different level than what I know about what I think I know about.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean you got Baze and you got Chirrut, and they're both badasses in their own
Hmm.
respective martial arts here. What
Yes.
did we get after that? The Praetorian Guards in the Last Jedi?
Yeah. Yes, that would be the
Maybe
Praetorian
some.
Guard.
Oh, we had Rebels as well.
Yeah.
There was some Mandalorian stuff.
Yeah, and you saw, Grand Admiral Thrawn,
That's right. We had Grand
kick
Admiral
some.
Thrawn in there. I think that was probably around or right after the Last Jedi. Those
Yeah.
final episodes of Rebels, probably similar time frame there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't like off the top of my head, I can't really think like there was a ton in Rebels, but
Yeah.
there were moments where various characters would, you know, I feel like Kanan at some point fought without his lightsaber a couple times.
Yeah. Well, you had a blaster the first episode.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing between Cal and Kanan, Luke Skywalker.
Hmm.
How many Jedi had chosen to? I think Quinlan Voss had chosen to start carrying blasters.
Hmm.
I vaguely remember this comic book cover with Quinlan Voss, and he was holding a gun at the reader,
Hmm.
and it says like a Jedi with a blaster or something like that. You know,
Right.
like the tagline on the comic cover.
Right.
Obviously, that got my $4.50 instantly.
Right.
Yeah, kids, a comic book that was an expensive comic book back then.
Yep.
Star Wars Republic, I believe, was the series that was in. Um, so
But
then
yeah, Bakuni hand
Bakuni,
by the,
what is that?
is the martial art of the elite Praetorian Guard,
Okay, so here we go. Yeah, I was just gonna say
who
Praetorian Guards. Get us back on
we
track.
saw with many different weapons that were not lightsabers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's pull up the Praetorian Guard weapons real quick because I feel like we don't really actually get to see them very well in the film.
Sure. Well, there was that uh, sword that became a whip sort of thing.
Yep. But was it as?
There's
Did any of them have edges, or were they all like
well,
lightsaber sort of
kind of.
edges, like kyber
They were
edges?
like they're supposed to be like vibro axes.
Yeah.
So like their edges would vibrate, but I don't think they were like energy based.
So there's okay. So here's a couple edge. Yeah, they do have a couple edge weapons. So there's like this sort of looks
The
like a what is that, a
Electro
Quandao or
Bicento.
something like that?
The Electro Bicento
Is that the one with the big
is
cleaver at the end?
yeah, correct.
Then there's this sort
So
of Naginata looking one,
yeah, so you have the Electro Bicento, Bellari Electro Chain Whip,
which
which
is
is
that sword
the
spear
sword that
pokey whip
yeah,
thing.
yeah, the Vibro Arbier Blade, which kind of looks like uh two axes almost.
Two. Is that the double weapon that the one do? It's sort of like an S shape when it's together, and then he
Mm-hmm.
takes it apart.
Right, right.
Yep. And then you have that Naginata looking thing. What is that called?
Yeah, the Volge, Voulge.
So this
Vibro
reminded
Volge.
me a lot of um, the Crimson Empire stuff that I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
Carnor Jax, I think, was the name of the one Imperial Guard. He became Kennick's Kill, who was a bounty hunter, and he used his Imperial Guard weapon, which those little things that they're carrying in Return of the Jedi,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly, back in the 90s, the lore was that those things could basically, like, with like the flick of a switch or something, like turn into like these Naginata pike type weapons.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, didn't seem that way in the movie for sure, but
Hmm.
they like those Crimson Empire like stories, man, those Imperial Guards were intensely trained. And they had some scary looking weapons. I believe cortosis was involved in some of these weapons. You know how people just love to throw cortosis into the mix.
Right.
Oh God, the Morgukai. We talked about them. The Nikto Morgukai.
Hmm.
They were anti Jedi martial artists. Oh my gosh, we're jumping all around, but guys, and then I guess the latest one would be, we had Ahsoka, we had the Mandalorian and Boba Fett. Both had.
Hmm.
I thought in Boba Fett and in the Mandalorian, the fights between Mandalorians where they would, like what's her name, the wrestling Snoop Dogg's cousin, and Boba Fett, they fight in a bar
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
Mandalorian. The Mandalorian himself, constantly getting himself shot at and his blaster,
Hmm.
kicked away or what have you.
Hmm.
And then we get the Acolyte, which is
Yeah.
chock full of non-lightsaber martial arts. Chock full.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, and very largely based on what seems to be Chinese martial arts.
Yeah. A lot of wire fu going on there.
Yeah, but that also, I mean, that kind of plays to the groove that the show is trying to accomplish.
Right.
That sort of old martial arts movie feel.
Yeah, it's very much
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sort of feel.
yeah, it's Shakespearean. It has that sort of,
Poetic
emphasis that
nature.
everybody can understand that, yes, you killed my father, prepare to die.
Right, right.
Sort of
On God,
sport.
you knave.
Yeah, right. It's basically how it goes, but that's, in a style that has not been seen just yet. I
It,
mean, it starts off just like the Western. There's a bar fight,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But wait, also in nearly every wuxia movie, there's a bar fight,
yes,
So just because of all the surfaces you can play with in a bar, in a restaurant, and it's just how the stuff goes, right?
yeah.
So really, in the non-lightsaber martial arts, there is a plethora, a treasure trove in the Star Wars universe that you can go and pull from. Now, are you going to be, organizing a Terrace Kasi tournament? Probably not,
No,
but
just go to a martial arts tournament.
yeah,
Just
that
enter
it works.
sparring.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
and
go
that's
kickbox.
what it is. It's an that's your MMA.
Yeah.
There's your thing. But yeah, when you're looking at analogs or direct correlations from the real world to the Star Wars universe, there are so many different planets in the Star Wars universe, and so many different types of physiology, and on top of that, you have the Force.
Now,
And now we have humans on our
right,
planet,
right.
and look at the tons of martial arts we have. So yeah, it will consistently be a never-ending thing.
I hope they
I
keep coming
believe.
with it. It does seem like, based on sort of my jibber jabbering, that there are waves of it in Star Wars. Though, like they gave
Hmm.
us a ton of it in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s. Then it kind of
Hmm.
petered off.
Right.
Then they gave us a ton more in Clone Wars, and as Disney started to ramp up, then it
Yeah,
kind of petered off again. Then
it just depends
again.
on whether or not it's it depends on whether or not it makes sense to rename something or name it at all,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
true too. Yeah,
So, like,
Snaggletooth.
is it, yeah, is it,
That's a deep cut for
it,
anybody who knows.
yeah, is there a actual reason to say, oh, I'm doing this particular style against you?
Yeah.
No, unless you're doing, like, the chatty duel from The Princess Bride.
Right. Or,
There's no reason.
UFC 1. Everybody loves to talk about UFC 1. It's so
Yeah,
great, man. It's so great. Hoist Gracie.
yeah,
Yeah, great, whatever. Back then, it was still kickboxing versus taekwondo,
yeah,
right? Kuk Sool Wan
exactly.
versus Savat.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's always
wrestling
like
versus judo.
but that's what you're looking at, right? Is like, again, this is entertainment.
Well,
You're
and
trying to tell a story.
it's workshopping too, Alan. Like
Yeah,
it's historical workshopping if you think about it. Like
right.
in 1992, I think, or three, when the UFC happened, and then for the
Yeah,
first 30 UFCs after that, maybe it was largely about like trying to figure out which martial art could overcome which other martial art
right.
until people started to realize like why would I want to do one that could overcome another when I could just start stealing crap from others? And that's not a new
Exactly.
concept.
No,
I mean,
that's
from
as old
Bruce
as
Lee
martial
to
arts.
Musashi to right, that's been around forever. Back to
Right,
pancration, but
right.
it
Hell, back
was
to cavemen.
yeah. But then we get to where we are again today, which is modern day pancration again, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's a modern day version of something they did thousands of years ago,
Yeah,
and it also goes in waves of we have to try style for style, then we have to try all styles, then we have to try no other style, then we have to try style for style again, right? And you just got to
hmm,
do these things. I feel like Hima's going through this in a big way right now, and as a sister art, saber martial arts of all kinds are also going through this in many ways.
yeah.
Um, like which rule set do I want to use and this and that. Speaking of which, just briefly, I think you've read it, maybe, Alan. I haven't touched on it in a long time, but we do have a rule set that does incorporate unarmed techniques into SMA competition. Now, we've never actually used it.
Right.
I've used it just teaching my students before, and it can be a veritable show if you have untrained people. So it's the kind of thing where if you're going to employ something like that, I would definitely make sure that the participants are actually trained in unarmed martial arts.
Right.
Now, this could not just be unarmed. It could also be like, I know Tony in Aiken, South Carolina, he does his Saber integrated training system is what he calls it, which basically is just another way to say MMA of saber fighting, because he incorporates other weapon styles and he has foam versions of other weapons, but they do not do unarmed in theirs, although Tony's quite the boxer. They don't do unarmed in their style, but that in and of itself, learning other weaponry in your saber fighting, like, there you go. That's what we're talking about too. I mean, Chirrut Imwe, he wasn't unarmed. He was armed. It was a staff. Learn the staff.
Right.
I mean, what's the most common, quote unquote, exotic saber right now in competition? The pike, right? But it's not a real pike. In a lot of these competitions, now our SMA rules pike is legitimate spear measurements. Okay, but that being aside, regardless of what the actual weapon looks like, take the time to go learn some of those actual techniques. If you're going to call it a pike or a spear or whatever the case is, go learn some of those actual techniques. There aren't a ton of them. They gave them to peasants because it's a pointy stick. It's not too hard to learn pointy stick. Now, if you want to get great with a pointy stick, that takes skill and practice, right? Double-bladed saber. Start by learning the staff. Is it identical? No. But start by learning the staff. Then do this wacky thing where you take two swords and you stick them both in reverse grip and try that a little bit. And that's not super practical, but if you want to use a double-bladed saber, some of these things are just useful. Right. The staff teaches you how to grip switch. Grip switching is hella important for a lot of different weapons. But for a double-bladed saber, if you just want to do some choreography with a friend, like, it's really important to know how to grip switch.
Yeah. And actually know where the other end is while you're engaging with one end.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that in one of our episodes.
Super important.
When Cal was doing his Cal Kestis. We're like, I know it's animated, but he doesn't even look like he's coming close to cutting himself. That's impressive. Right. Crossguard saber. That's another one. Like, longsword techniques are really fun, but if you have the right type of crossguard saber hilt, you can actually employ some actual longsword techniques, and it's cool. But you have to incorporate things other than the lightsaber into your training, or at least the concepts, right? You can use the lightsaber to do most of the things, but you have to conceptually, you have to try some different things.
Right. And
unarmed, Alan, just Teres Kasi, just to kind of, again, use it as a catch-all term. What are some of the things, like, I know in, Filipino martial arts, a lot of Southeast Asian martial arts, knives and sticks are like what people fight with. Yeah. So right away, those are two things that are very easy to go absorb knowledge on. But the defense against those things, first of all, understanding that, like, everybody gets cut when there's blades involved. Like, you don't not get cut. You don't not be in danger. This is a bad situation already, right? And if somebody is armed with a weapon and you are not, that's already a worse situation. Like, it's not good from the get-go. So just acting, just learning what how to start an action in that case, right? Or as somebody comes in to attack you, and just learning how to mitigate all this danger into a small amount of danger, right? Those types of things actually really translate great when you actually have the lightsaber in your hand and you're competing. Your sense of, like, personally, I slip way more saber strikes than I actually block and parry.
Right.
And I fancy myself a bit of a Form 5ist, but most of my Form 5 is in the blade manipulation and the application of power. It's not in actually parrying and blocking to counter. It's in slipping and then countering, or smacking the blade, slipping and countering, right? So that comes from my unarmed training. That's because like blocking strikes freaking hurts, man. Like, it's not all fun and games. You know this. Somebody throws a punch at you and you actually block that punch or parry that punch. There's pain associated with it. Sometimes a lot of pain. If you get kicked in the arms,
Later, whether or not you did well or not.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Like, you block a kick that's going towards your body. Sometimes I think to myself, I should have just taken that freaking kick to the body. It would have done just as much or maybe less damage, because my arms are freaking aching. I can't even throw a punch now, right? The only place I don't want to get hit, like, ever, is the head. But, like, sometimes blocking is more pain. Like checking kicks with your leg, that's a crapshoot on whose shin is going to win. Right. So I think learning the various good and bad, because a lot of them are terrible, but good and bad defenses against an armed opponent when you are unarmed from various martial arts, I think it's all worthwhile, and something that you can kind of incorporate into maybe your own version of a little Teras Kasi, or just a little element that you can add to the defensive aspect of your saber fighting, maybe. I don't know, Alan, do you have thoughts on that actual sort of what I'm talking about right now, which is, I don't even really know.
So, I mean, we started talking about non-saber martial arts, and it's kind of been all over the place because they are all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, not remembering what you said 2 seconds ago, completely understandable. Because when we're looking at different things, like, what we were doing was going, okay, original trilogy, right? Did we see any non-saber martial arts? Not really. Blasters, basically,
Yeah.
right? And then, okay, what came after the original? Okay, the prequels. Okay, we did see, I think they're still called vibro staffs. What the droids had.
The electro staffs. Oh, I forgot about that.
Staffs.
Oh, and just really quickly, those Magna Guards, again, were supposed to have been trained by General Grievous in various martial arts styles. Right. Okay,
and
continue.
Then, of course, we had the Mandalorians in that as well. Yep. Because even though he was identified as Mandalorian, the Mandalorians didn't. The Mandalorians in the Clone Wars did not recognize Jango Fett as a Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And then you had the clone troopers going through all the martial arts, and not just the blaster training, but the ARC trooper training, and all that stuff. Then itself.
And I think Rex and Cody show a little bit of that. I'm thinking back to the Clone Wars movie from 2008, and I think Commander Cody does a little gun fu.
Yeah. That was the time to do it. During those few things.
Yeah.
And of course you have all the Jedi martial arts, right, where they're flipping and jumping and stuff like that. It's not just a Taru. They actually have to to learn that without their saber on, as well as when they have their saber on. So I assume they don't start with the lightsaber in their hand when they do that.
Well, and I think we got some saber boken coming up in the Acolyte too, right? So
Right.
That
Right.
even
Well,
shows
and
you that the
another
Jedi,
thing you see.
they train with
Yeah, you
sticks
see
and
that.
clubs first, right?
eh, right. In the we start with that um in some of the other media as well, because of course we're just talking about movies, but in the almost 50 years Star Wars has been around, it is actually, there's been so much media, comic books, novels, and all that stuff. So
Even just little
it's near,
magazine articles
yeah,
and fiction
nearly
bits.
impossible to get all of
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right? And then, that's even only the stuff that's in English, right?
Oh,
There's,
geez, man, you really
so
took it right back to the beginning of the episode on that bilingual
yeah.
there.
So basically, then we go into the sequel and the fill-in movies, right? The sequels and stuff, and we see a scrapper with a staff, right? Uh, we see Chirrut Imwe with a staff. You see a lot of stuff. Then we see the Mandalorian,
The
where you see
Praetorians.
With the Praetorian. Oh, right. We saw the Praetorians in the sequel trilogy. We saw, um, you know, Boba Fett with a gaffy stick.
Oh
Or
yeah,
the
which was based on
uh,
the Maori martial arts, which was so
right.
cool, man, so
Yeah,
cool.
the way they choreographed that was based on that. Um, and so you see that there's like not only just real life martial arts being paid homage to, but also like just such a plethora of um, of subject matter to be, you know, shared within just that. And I know you're a Star Wars gearhead, so let's not even start talking about ships
Oh
and,
yeah,
and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where it's like the reason a lot of people love this universe is because it has so much stuff in it that you can love. And, there's even stuff that I was reading one of the High Republic books today, and I was just like, okay, that's kind of cool. That's a different take and different description of the Force that
yeah.
I've ever read. You know, so so when you're looking at this, um, I really look at it as an extension of martial arts, right? Is also being an extension of art, right? There's different
Yeah.
expressions of things, and you know, I want to say somebody, whoever the writers are, or that do any of this media, think really hard about, how does this species hold their lightsaber, or how do they move, and it's et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, they're just making stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They might be paying homage to something, but they're trying not to make it the actual thing. And that's one of the coolest things about it, is your interpretation of it is so much,
Yeah.
that means more to you than the interpretation somebody else has of it. Because your version of whatever it is that you're looking at, whether it's Anakin toying with Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, like, oh, that's all German longsword. Actually, that's a little
Yeah.
bit more Italian. Actually, that's a little bit more Kendo. Actually, yeah, whatever. It's all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what
Yeah. Yeah.
you take from it. So that's really what I'm taking from this conversation, is that, is so much out there, because it's a many faceted jewel, and depending on
Oh,
which angle you're looking at it, the facets look different or are different colors. So
well,
there you go.
that was awesome. Yeah, I'm glad somebody got something out of this episode. Hopefully, somebody else does and shares it with someone else. Really quickly,
It
honorable mention: a couple characters that I just thought of that are, just to give you some other examples. Visas Mar was an Achani um, Jedi-ish character, I believe, from KOTOR. Uh, what's the guy from the Shatterpoint novel? Mace Windu's clan brother. Um, oh man, his I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he fought with shields, with giant like kind of like Captain America did on in Wakanda, like those
Okay.
two slender sort of shields, except not as
Okay, so
slender.
he did like an African martial art.
Yeah, but he, like I said, he's Mace Windu's brother from Harun Kal, not real brother, but clan brother, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of anyway. That's largely explored in that book. Trying to think of Embo from Clone Wars. He does some fancy Taekwondo type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and Wing Chun type stuff in Clone Wars. In addition to being an ace with the crossbow. Let me think. Cad Bane, I believe, has some skill. Of
Chewie
course,
can rip off your arms.
uh, I guess the Masters of Terraskasi game. If you want to watch, Tekken with Star Wars skins, then there's that.
It's not as good as Tekken.
No, it's not.
Let's
It's
make sure.
really not. There's a whole bunch. Those ones are really off the top of my head. Zam Wessel, that's another one that in lore apparently she was pretty badass.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's some honorable mentions. What's Katie Sackhoff's character? Bo-Katan with the shields that come out of her gauntlets.
Mhm. Yeah, the Mandalorian martial arts are there too. The different types of them
And
as
KOTOR,
well. Because
there's
yeah,
that in KOTOR as well. Actually, KOTOR, if you want to go to a couple different dojos across the galaxy, play the KOTOR games.
yeah,
You go to a couple different like training facilities, military and martial training facilities. I think there's a Wookiee one. There's a Mandalorian one or two. There's an Achani one. There's another one too. So there's a couple of Jedi and Sith
Carvastor
ones.
is who you were thinking about.
Carvaster, that's the one. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's just a little honorable mention, and I feel like this topic will come up again, a few months from now,
Yeah.
probably with a guest next time. But keep your eye on the holocron and in some of our competitions, because I talked to Courtney recently, Alan, about a little bit about this topic. But I know you and I have recently talked about kind of the Terrace Kasi idea, and so if you have any thoughts and you wanna chat with some nerds about it, send us an email, sabermaoutreach@gmail.com, subject line Terrace Kasi, and I'll know that we're in for a conversation. And if you have something you're developing, reach out to us, let us know. I'm curious. We're not real into theft, so nobody's trying to steal your style. We do just like to learn. And the other thing I would say is sabermartialarts.life. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. Please share us with people so that we can share more with you. And bring your own saber.
This party's over.